Hi, Movie Monkeys. It's Ryan Ellis, Bev Ellis, my wife, back for our 5th on-camera YouTube video for Have You Ever Seen? I don't know if I ever say, or usually say, Have You Ever Seen for these, but then that is the title of the thing as well. So the entire Inside Llewyn Davis podcast will follow after this chat of 5 to 10, maybe longer, minutes. We've gone about 8 to 10 minutes so far every time. Today we'll talk about some corrections on Inside Llewyn Davis. By the way, you didn't say hello. Go ahead.
Hi.
There it is. So corrections on Inside Llewyn Davis and another theory as well I have about it. We'll talk about 2 movies we've just recently seen in the last few days, the Oscar nominations, which are connected to the movies we've seen, and then a listener email as well. So the first thing to do, of course, is to have those corrections about Inside Llewyn Davis. I called him Bruno Del Bono, the cinematographer on this movie and other Coen Brothers films. It's actually Bruno Del Bonel. I looked it up, heard a few people say it, so I have to take their word for it, that they know better than me. Bruno Del Bonel. Sorry if this caused any pain and suffering on Bruno. Also, in Bad Teacher, we talked about that in the Inside Llewyn Davis podcast. What Justin Timberlake hates so much is not just racism, it's slavery. And if he could go back in time and undo slavery, he would.
Truly a great joke.
He hates it. Also, Garrett Hedlund was not the running back in Friday Night Lights. He was the fullback. Football fans are probably outraged by my mistake there.
I was outraged.
I apologize for any pain this may have caused, including to you. Another correction. Carey Mulligan doesn't have more Oscar nominations than Adam Driver. She has the same as him. They both have 2. Finally, this isn't a correction, but I wanted to point out that it's ironic that I mentioned 3 guys who were not up for Best Actor in 2013, but could have been. Redford, Hanks, and Oscar Isaac in this film. 2 of the guys are boat captains, Redford and Hanks.
Yeah.
And Oscar Isaac wants to go on a boat to be a merchant marine. Well, wants is debatable, but that's what he's trying to do.
It's the Oscars anti-marine bias.
Maybe so, yeah. Well, that was a great category that year. And the guy that you thought should have won the Oscar, Leo, in Wolf of Wall Street, is often on a boat in the Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He has like a yacht.
And disaster strikes when they're on a boat as well. And we covered last week a movie that's all about a boat, Triangle of Sadness, which was up for Best Picture.
Surprise. A big surprise nomination. Holy.
So let's get into the Oscar nominations then. The nominations were announced last Tuesday. I've already compiled extensive notes about the facts and figures, plus the intriguing storylines about the show that we always do in the Oscars preview show, which will be March the 6th. Of course, Monday, March the 6th, we'll be doing that. But your first thoughts about it, including you just said, Triangle of Sadness being a nominee for Best Picture, the director, and what's the other thing? Isn't it 3? Maybe it's only 2.
No, you got a screenplay. You got original
right.
Screenplay. As a big Roland Östlund head. I mean, obviously not.
Ruben.
Not a big enough fan.
She's such a fan.
Learn.
I guess it's Östlund. I think I said Östlund last week. It might be Östlund.
This is me. I can be like a big fan of a filmmaker and never learn how to pronounce their name. I just finally figured out how to say Yorgos Lanthimos, and I still am not confident I'm saying it right.
That's phonetic, though. If you look at his name, you say it how it looks.
Well, then I guess you could say the same about Ruben.
If it's Östlund.
Östlund. I mean, I've only seen his last 3 films, which are Force Majeure, which I love, The Square, which I like a lot, and Triangle of Sadness, which isn't my favorite film of the year, but it might be. It's definitely my top 10.
Okay. So anyway, so your overall thoughts. We've now seen, we'll talk about them in a little more detail in a second, but we saw Women Talking and Tar the 2 days that followed. So going into it, we had seen very few Best Picture nominees. Now I've seen half. You haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet. I haven't seen Avatar, and you probably won't. I might. I don't know. We'll see.
It's the one that I will skip.
Okay. We'll see The Fabelmans, definitely, at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And All Quiet on the Western Front as well, which is on Netflix. That'll be easy to see. We'll probably catch that in the next couple of days. So of the movies I've seen, I don't hate anything. I wasn't bothered by some of the things like I was last year. Some of the candidates, I won't talk about. Eddie Redmayne was nominated. Not Eddie Redmayne. It was, what's his name? Andrew Garfield. Was not a fan of him being nominated for that movie. Not really a fan of his. But I have to see a lot of the movies. I could end up saying in a few weeks, oh man, why is this person there? Why is that movie here? There were definitely some big omissions, and a huge one was Danielle Deadwyler for her work in Till. We saw that, I think, 2 days before the nominations, or maybe the day before the nominations. Her and the cinematography should have been locks for nominations, and they might have both been worthy of winning.
I was disappointed that Nope didn't have a showing at all. It's definitely a better movie than some of the movies on that Best Picture list. I guess they didn't campaign at all. That's the only explanation, because
It did succeed. It wasn't like it was a movie that came and went.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big hit. His first movie, of course, Jordan Peele's. Get Out is certainly his biggest hit. But all three movies have been successful. They've all been so original, which is one reason why the screenplay maybe could have been recognized.
Yes, a really creative original film that was made for film lovers. There's so many homages in it. That man loves movies, and it really comes through. I really suspect that the studio just didn't make a push for it. Otherwise, I think it would have had a great chance at a few, especially screenplay. But also maybe Best Picture. I don't think it's the best movie of the year, but I think it's better than some of the Best Picture nominees.
But you're not outraged by some of them so far. Well, Then again, Top Gun, I knew it was going to get nominated. I thought it would get nominated. I shouldn't say knew. Avatar mildly surprised me, but they're the two biggest hits of the year, and people are saying about Top Gun especially, it's a thank you for saving the business.
Yeah, well, I hope Top Gun graciously says you're welcome.
But the screenplay for Top Gun Maverick is up for an Oscar, which did surprise me. I like the movie, but the screenplay?
I was pleased to see that Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Most nominations, got 11.
Yeah. I was worried that they were just going to overlook it because it's such a weird movie and it's a goofy movie. But the momentum behind it was just too strong, and because it got so many nominations, I think it might be a frontrunner.
Oh, I think it is the frontrunner, I'd say, even though it is so strange. So again, we'll talk more about the nominations in our show on March the 6th. But people have asked before about the dogs. They've never been seen on camera before because we've only done 5 videos. This is Sam.
Say hi, Sam.
The blind dog. He's probably basically deaf at this point, too. Yeah. He loves to lick. Sometimes you'll hear him snoring or licking himself when he's under the table when we record facing each other. Like
he always has to be with us. He's always under the table when we're recording. And sometimes he just needs to be part of it.
And if you can't see it, he has a diaper on because he can't be trusted not to pee in the house.
He's an old man.
He fills that thing constantly. Just like I didn't acknowledge at the beginning of the podcast, my shirt, which of course is a Coen Brothers reference. Bev got this from me many years ago, and I've worn it probably 1,000 times. So of those 10 Best Picture nominees, we saw Women Talking in the theater the day of the nominations, and we saw Tar at home the day after the nominations. You read the Women Talking book, so you have more insight in that with the subtext and whatnot that you told me about on the way home. I thought the movie was at least solid. I was definitely compelled to watch it. I would give it a thumbs up, but go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't love it. I didn't love the book. That's really what it comes down to.
Your book club, the other people in the book club didn't like it either.
No, none of us liked it.
Not just you.
It's really dry and intellectual. And I think also for me, it's well-tread subject for any woman who's remotely interested in what's been going on in the world for the past 6 years. So it just feels like a topic that's been done to death, too. But I will say that movie, while I didn't, especially the first half, it took me a long time to get into it. It won me over by the end. And I have not stopped thinking about it. It has really stayed in my mind, and that just says so much about a movie that I found myself living in that world and tempted to revisit it. So I wonder if I need to watch it again, because sometimes movies are so much better a second time around when you know exactly what to expect.
Sam's down here.
And I have to give it a second chance because it's by my fave, Sarah Polley.
Yeah. Good director.
My little girlfriend.
And she's up for writing it.
That nomination for Best Picture. Plus, I feel like it's like a bit of a nomination for Canada because she's a big Canadian director.
Yeah. So not a fun movie, but a pretty good one. And as for Tar, I have to agree with those that say it's one of the best movies of the year. And I know some people that say it's the best movie of the year. I haven't seen enough yet. I certainly haven't seen everything yet. So I don't want to say, I don't have a top 10 list yet because I haven't seen enough movies, even though it's end of January as we post this. But this is definitely going on my top 10 list, and it could be number 1. I did not know what I was in for at all, and I guess you could say blown away.
I was prepared to be bored because it was long and I'd heard it was a really arty film. It blew me away. I've been obsessed with it. I've been reading think pieces about it and watching video essays about it. I just never want to stop digging deeper, and I think the second viewing is going to be so exciting.
Oh, yeah.
There is so much depth. I don't know who I'm rooting for, Cate Blanchett or Michelle Yeoh. How do you pick?
Oh, if they've been in the movie to win the Oscar.
Oh, no. Well, in the movie, you never know who to root for either. It's such a great character study. Really beautiful, complex film about a topic. Again, same sort of topic as Women Talking, but this feels so...
Blew out my knee there. Continue.
But this feels so, I don't know, fresh. It's such a great angle to take. Oh, I just loved it. We're going to do an episode about it someday, for sure, because it's just too rich with subtext.
I don't think it'll win Best Picture, so we won't cover it for that reason. We will cover the Best Picture winner later in the year, like we always do. But maybe we'll cover Tar regardless. Okay, last thing is an email from a longtime listener named Jess. She recently saw Almost Famous, and she agrees with your take.
Oh, really?
She was not a big fan of the film. So she watched it, then listened to us. She appreciated many things about it, and it made her laugh more than she expected it to. But something about it rubbed her the wrong way. She doesn't love that it glamorizes a time and place that she doesn't have a fondness for, although she also says she doesn't normally get hung up on issues like that, so that isn't typically something that she dwells on. The bottom line is she thought the movie had its head up its own ass.
Wow.
And she rolled her eyeballs so hard she almost sprained them a few times.
Yeah, girl, I relate.
I love the movie, so I'm going to answer what I think in a second, but Bev, anything you want to comment on that? Just you agree with her, I guess.
This is why I say, even when I feel like my opinion is unpopular, it's important to just be honest about liking a movie no one else likes or disliking a movie that everybody else likes. When we did that podcast, it was the first time I'd ever confessed to you that I didn't like that movie because I knew you loved it so much, and I was like, okay, well, I can just keep my opinion to myself. But speaking of things rubbing the wrong way, for me it boils down to the character of Penny Lane. There's something about her that just, I can't put my finger on it. I don't like it.
Okay, so here's my response to that, Jess. You have a good day. One of the best line readings from a non-character, but her friend, his sister's friend that works for the airline, the stewardess. Remember that? When they see him in the airport? You have a good day. We're back on the tubes next Monday with our full In the Mood for Love podcast, and most likely another sit-down chat like this. We've done it all 5 times so far since the beginning of the year. We will have seen a bunch more Oscar nominees by then, so we'll probably talk about those, and if there's listener emails or such, or comments, what have you, we'll probably dwell on one of those as well. Talk about one of those as well. Let's grow the channel because we've had bonus content like this, plus the podcast, which in seconds you're going to hear in its entirety. If you already did, then you're going to hear the exact same thing with our cover slide. Meanwhile, thanks so much for spending time with us, and my Big Lebowski related shirt and your black t-shirt. Now hang me, oh hang me. And let's go with our Inside Llewyn Davis podcast. While giving milk to a cat was not commonly known to be the wrong thing to do in the early 60s, it was, and still is, even more ill-advised to let your feline sip on coffee. But unless your reality has become sci-fi or something, and no one told me, you're not a cat. And since we've now established that it's just us humans doing the talking, doing the listening, and drinking things other than water for cats, you might love a hot brown liquid in your mug. Sparkplug Coffee is all over that. They offer fairly traded, premium Arabica beans, and you can choose from so many roasts and blends, including half-calf and decaf. Their beans are the freshest in Canada, and they'll ship them to anyone in the U.S., or of course in Canada, in a week, or probably even less. We Canadians will even get free shipping, so you don't need to bum a ride to the Midwest to get some, or to Toronto, where they originate from. Unlike Llewyn Davis, no one is telling you you don't have what it takes to make it in this business, no matter how good you are at your craft and how bad you are at the rest of your life. Neither is anyone telling you that you must be a member of Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club. But if you are, you'll get deals and perks that the casual customer does not. Set it and forget it, baby. Although you can customize your membership. This ain't no coffee of the month scam. And you can cancel or even just put a hold on it whenever necessary. And if you're as broke as our hero is in this movie, you might indeed have to pause a coffee membership to save every cent you can. Sparkplug.coffee is your link, but at HYES, and you can take advantage of our Have You Ever Seen promo code to save 20% on your next order. Now, Andrew Luther, do what Llewyn Davis would never do and plug in that keyboard to play the Have You Ever Seen theme music.
And action! Have you ever seen
Inside Llewyn Davis? Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 489th Dippity-Doo of This Classic Movies podcast. We're now 1 month into this new era of a different name. We were the Top 100 Project for almost 10 years, but this spoiler-laden Chatorama has hundreds of episodes in the archives, most of which have our old name all over them, and a lot of those are Coen Brothers movies. I'm the Welsh-Italian homeless grump who can pick a mean guitar and sing better than nearly anybody. Okay, none of that's true about me. Nothing. Not one bit of that's true about me. Ryan Ellis. And here's the folk singer who refuses to plug in because she's just a wireless kind of girl. My wife, Bev.
That's me.
And of course, that's a lie, too, because you're always plugged in.
I don't know what you're talking about,
you're on your phone, on that phone more than anybody I know. I don't know that many teenagers, so. We'll be talking, of course, about Inside Llewyn Davis today, but longtime listeners might ask themselves, did you guys cover this movie a long time ago? Has it come to this? A clip show? Well, yes, we did talk about it at the end of December 2013, but we've decided to do full and proper re-reviews of some of what we called the Now Playing Project podcasts. We had just seen the movie when we reviewed those movies 10 years ago, and we didn't have any perspective, so let's rectify that. We'll be doing this again a few more times throughout the year. So the coming attractions trivia for our first re-review, Inside Llewyn Davis. We've occasionally mentioned BBC Culture's 2016 poll that listed the 100 greatest films of the 21st century. Inside Llewyn Davis was 11th. How many other Coen brothers movies made their top 100?
Just 2. Way down on the list is A Serious Man, and right next to Llewyn Davis at number 10 is No Country for Old Men.
A Serious Man's 82nd on that list. I'm not shocked A Serious Man made it. Never loved that movie that much, but okay, I guess I can understand why people would. No Country, not surprised about that, but this being 11th, that did surprise me.
Yeah, people love this movie more than I would expect them to, considering it's kind of a downer.
And it wasn't exactly a blockbuster at the time, although it did make 3 times its budget worldwide. It cost 11 million simoleons, and it made 33 million worldwide, so that's not terrible for a movie that cost a little to make. So after screening at Cannes and many other festivals throughout 2013, A Man and Someone Else's Cat was given a slow release 10 years ago by CBS Films in December of 2013. Bev, remind us what this nearly 10-year-old movie's about. Inside Llewyn Davis, the skinny please. Hit it.
Oscar Isaac is Llewyn Davis, a folk singer in New York in the early 1960s.
He was a folk singer.
Yeah, and Llewyn is very talented, but he's getting nowhere with his career. He's broke, homeless, and determined to burn every bridge in his life with his acerbic wit and a string of terrible decisions. After a failed last-ditch attempt to get a record contract in Chicago, Llewyn decides to give up and join the Merchant Marines like his father. But he fails at even that, ultimately finding himself right back where he was at the beginning.
Or, in a nutshell, about getting inside Llewyn Davis, we don't.
Another reason I'm surprised it's popular is it's opaque.
It's one of those movies where you spend an entire film with a guy. He's in every scene, I think, right? Certainly most scenes. I think it's every scene. He's played by a terrific actor, but we don't get to know that much about him, and we certainly don't learn his every little secret. Coens were pretty good about voiceovers because, of course, they homaged many times. We even pointed out a few scenes in this. Kubrick. And Kubrick would use almost always voiceover narration or title cards in his films. And the Coens have done that plenty of times, too. I thought they don't do narration that much in their films, but Raising Arizona does. There's some parts of No Country that does that, too.
And The Big Lebowski.
Big Lebowski, of course, with The Stranger. So that's not even really something you could say, here, maybe we needed to have that, except maybe they didn't want us to know more about this guy because they dare us to follow him and even like him despite the fact he is such an unlikable character in many ways. No one seems to really truly like him, and he doesn't like anybody else either.
I think something that would define the Coens' films in the 21st century is that they stopped trying to tell us what they're doing. They've made their films more opaque, more hard to understand. I love it, but then sometimes it's too much. For instance, A Serious Man, a movie that a lot of people really love, I find so confounding because I just feel like I don't get it.
We should try it next year when it's 15 years old.
Listen, I would love to talk about it. It's a movie I like watching even though I don't like it, if that makes sense, because it confounds me, and I'm always trying to solve the puzzle, but I don't know if they gave you enough pieces to solve the puzzle. Or maybe they do if you're a certain kind of person that can relate to a certain time and place and a certain kind of family.
Be Jewish.
But it's not me.
We're not Jewish.
Yeah, maybe be Jewish. Maybe be born in the 40s. Maybe these are the things that'll help you understand and relate to this character and what's happening to him. I find it similar with Inside Llewyn Davis. I love this movie, but I can't find my way in to him, and I do find it confounding, especially because you really want to root for him. We've been trained by every other movie we've ever seen to like the main character, and then he does a few things that make it very difficult to stay with him. And they don't let you turn away from that either. But because it's so artfully crafted, they know what they're doing. This is a real character that they put a lot of great thought into, and they're just such wonderful writers, and Oscar Isaac is a wonderful actor, and you can at least trust that it wasn't a mistake. I trust that they were doing it intentionally to get a certain response out of the audience. And everything else there is to love about this movie makes it worth taking on that challenge. And you could say the same about No Country for Old Men. It can be a very confounding and difficult film, very challenging, but people still love it. And I've heard people say that Hail Caesar was their favorite Coen film of this century. I need to give it another shot. I need to watch it again. It just felt like a brick wall to me. I didn't get what they were trying to do with it.
Maybe this is supposed to be some kind of, not even homage, but some kind of reference to themselves. They've succeeded, not necessarily box office-wise, but certainly with awards, which I'm sure they don't really care about. But there's got to be a part of them that says, it's nice to be honored at all at the Oscars. And they've won 4. They've been at the show so many times. And even if publicly they would say, well, it means nothing. I don't think anybody who gets honored with something like that, whether it be a Grammy, an Oscar, a Tony, or an Emmy, the EGOT, that honestly could feel like this means nothing. Or if
they still show up. They still collect it.
Joel goes with Frances McDormand when she's nominated. It could just be that she goes with her son or her sister or a friend, but he always goes there. But anyway, maybe that's part of what's going on here with these two guys is they feel like we wanted to be our own person and to hell with everybody else who didn't get it. But then people got it because Blood Simple was, I think, relatively speaking, a hit. Raising Arizona, I think, was too. They don't make hits, but they make movies that people basically like. And sometimes they do pretty well, including this one, for the budget it cost. And they keep on getting to make movies with the various studios they've worked with because they don't really cost that much money. But I bet there's a part of them that feels like, we almost didn't want you guys to like us so we could have done our own thing, but they've gotten to do their own thing and still feel like they are outsiders.
I would disagree in the sense that I think that especially earlier in their career, they were trying to make people-pleasing films. Like Raising Arizona is a film that wants you to like it. They want you to find it funny. And I think they've always understood that their audience is going to be quirky and different, and they're never going to be mainstream filmmakers. But you can't tell me that some of their early films aren't them trying to win people over and make films that people will like. And I think they're still trying to make films people will like, but now in the twilight of their career, let's be honest, they probably don't have a ton of years left. As a matter of fact, who is it that dropped out?
Ethan.
It was Joel that directed The Tragedy of Macbeth.
Right.
Alone. That's another parallel with this film. This movie is about a man who lost his partner, who was finding some level of success and happiness and fulfillment with a creative partner and couldn't do it on his own. And is so stuck in the loop of his grief over losing Mike, who died by suicide, that he is like destroying everything that he has left. And maybe that's part of the Coens' comment on their partners and they work together and their creative partnership means that much to them. They're not really that forthcoming about how they work and their method and what really goes on in their heads, so we kind of have to assume a lot with them. They treat their lives much like they treat their films, where they're like, it's none of your business. But I can see how now in the twilight of their career, maybe they're just very mature filmmakers, probably saying, look, if we are just going to make the kinds of films that we would want to see, we know our audience is going to find us, and even if they don't like it, they're going to give us another chance, because whether they care about those awards or not, those awards are what are going to keep them getting films greenlit.
That's true.
Because they're at the point where they're always going to be able to find funding for one of their movies, no matter what they want to do. Woody
Allen was getting funded by DreamWorks and by Weinstein, and maybe not so much now because of the various scandals, but he was getting funded through the 2000s into maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or even less. Even though his movies rarely succeeded, in the sense of it cost $20 million, but they still made $5 million, so it's still a failure. It didn't cost that much. It's not a Marvel budget, but it still lost money for the studio. But then they got Woody Allen.
It's
and
prestige.
through some of those films in the late 90s and into the 2000s, we get Oscar nominations for the writing, sometimes for the acting, and they wanted that opportunity, I guess, and they would keep on giving him that chance. And you work with Woody Allen, so that's probably what it is in some ways with these guys, too, although they make better movies in the modern era. Okay, then Rotten Tomatoes numbers are pretty good. 92% of critics like the film. 8.5 out of 10 is the average. There are 291 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes' site, but only 74% of audiences. Still a fresh tomato, but almost 20% less than the critics. The film was 127th at the 2013 U.S. box office. We've covered Gravity. That was 6th. That was a Now Playing Project podcast also. We've covered Wolf of Wall Street. That was a Now Playing Project podcast with American Hustle. That was 28th. Fruitvale Station. Got to mention that because we don't mention it often enough. It was the end of, when was that? A New Year's podcast we did a couple years ago, maybe 2020. But that was 123rd, so just slightly more than Inside Llewyn Davis. Llewyn Davis was nominated for 2 Oscars, Best Cinematography and Best Sound. Of course, cinematography is by Bruno Del Bono, who has become a regular now with those guys after so many movies they made with Roger Deakins. And he got many nominations for other awards, but that was it for the Oscars, just those 2. Even though if you look at the BBC Culture list, probably they'd nominate for Best Picture. I guess they would, and the screenplay, and probably Oscar Isaac. But that would have been tough that year, because we've talked about a few movies from that year that didn't get recognized for Best Actor. If you want to include Oscar Isaac, that's 3 men who weren't at the show that certainly could have been. Robert Redford in
All Is Lost.
All Is Lost, and Tom Hanks in Captain Phillips weren't there. Yet you look at the 5 that were, and you can see why they weren't. This was a juicy year for Best Actor candidates.
And even with all these guys that you just listed, I would have given it to DiCaprio that year for Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay, yeah. But that was the year of McConaughey.
For Dallas Buyers Club.
Which was also a good performance. Okay, we're way past opening thoughts, but anyway, you probably have some, so let's hear them now.
I really love this movie. Like I said earlier, I sympathize with anyone who struggles with it because it is bleak, it's a tough one, it can be hard to find the kernel of optimism or even to find a reason to root for Llewyn. But I think I'm always drawn to nuanced portrayals of depression. And whether you can get behind Llewyn or not, there's a tremendous draw to just the artistry of this film. Even by Coen standards, this film is a feast of beauty and meaning in every frame.
The look and sound are awesome. Those are two very appropriate nominations, the cinematography and the sound. We started this month with a musical film, A Star is Born, and we end with one.
The same way that Star is Born is musical in that every song is diegetic, no character ever just breaks into song, but music is absolutely massive to both films, and they have songs that were written just for the film, and the lyrics are specifically about the characters, pertain to their situation, and that's another reason to love this movie. The music is beautiful. This soundtrack, even though it wasn't a hit like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, it is pound for pound as good as that record.
Also, A Star is Born, they played live, or sang live at least, because Lady Gaga thought lip-syncing looked fake in movies. Same with this, they sang live. Even Adam Driver and Carey Mulligan, who aren't known as singers. Justin Timberlake, of course, is a singer, we know that. And then Oscar Isaac, he's got to do more musicals. Well, this isn't a musical, neither was A Star is Born. Not in the sense of, we're breaking into song. And I don't love that about a lot of musicals, but that's what a musical is to me. But these musical-type films, or movies that are about music, A Star is Born and this one, this month, the music itself is awesome, too, because I'm not really a folk person, but I don't dislike it. And so many of these songs are original. Oscar Isaac has a lot of writing credits on the songs here, and of course actually sings them. Hang Me, Oh Hang Me, Fare Thee Well, the song that Carey Mulligan, Justin Timberlake, and the other guy are singing, 500 Miles. If you didn't pull it off, then I think the movie would fall apart. And yet Oscar Isaac, you look at him and think, why isn't this guy actually doing that for a living?
Seriously.
Either in addition to, because so many people have bands, Russell Crowe, Kevin Bacon, Keanu Reeves, all these people that play music. Why isn't he doing that? Maybe he doesn't want to.
It's a great question, because beyond even having the pipes, because he has a wonderful singing voice, the way he emotes in that music, the pathos he puts into those songs, that is a real gift. I watched an interview with the Coens where they talked about casting. At the time, Oscar Isaac wasn't a nobody. He was making films, but he certainly wasn't a household name. This is the film that made sure I never forgot who he was ever again. To me, for a while, he was Llewyn Davis. But they said that they had been looking and they had been talking about it and had this screenplay and they really wanted to make this movie, but they were considering that they may just never find their Llewyn. And that if you couldn't find somebody who could sing and play and convincingly be a musician like that, as well as play this part and really do it justice, let's be honest, if Justin Timberlake was interested in the part of Llewyn Davis, this movie would not have been as good. He would be able to sing, but could he act that well?
He's a pretty good actor, but he's not
a good actor.
To carry a whole movie, especially something like this, I don't know.
And hard to believe him as such a dark character. You might approach this movie differently now that Oscar Isaac is a huge star, Star Wars, Marvel, coming in as a bit of a nobody. Then it was perfectly believable that he would be a loser, and he sells it.
It's almost always helpful in a movie like this to have somebody who's not that well known, or is a flat-out nobody, I think. You just said a lot of titles the guy had, because 2 years later, Force Awakens comes out. And then since then, he's in X-Men, Apocalypse, and Ex Machina. Well, I guess that was before that. And then Dune a couple years ago.
Also, I have a huge crush on him.
Well, it's a good-looking cast, too, because we don't think he's all that hot, but so many people think Adam Driver's at the pinnacle of great-looking guys. Timberlake's always been a handsome man.
He's my former crush back in the 2000s when he first went solo. I had a Justin Timberlake calendar that was initially ironic, but truthfully not that ironic because he was my crush at the time.
And then Carey Mulligan has put together quite a career, too, because she's a good-looking woman, certainly has talent. But one thing about this movie and this character that stands out so much, I don't think she's ever been funny, really, that much, and certainly never funnier than she was in this. And what stands out even more, on top of her being funny, is that like John Goodman in The Big Lebowski, or Steve Buscemi in Fargo, the Coen brothers can write characters who are full of fury, but are really funny about it. So funny fury. And she's on that list with Goodman and Buscemi, which says an awful lot because she's a good actress, but they're two, I don't know about legends, but they're somewhere in the legend category. And of course, two regulars with the Coens back in the day, not so much recently. Goodman hadn't worked with them in a long time, actually. I think it was Oh Brother was the last time he worked with them. And this is the last time he has worked with them. Although they haven't made that many movies since this one. But she is so funny in this movie because she's always so mad at him.
What do you think he did? They never tell us why she's so mad at him.
Well, he didn't rape her. She willingly slept with him, and she willingly slept with Pappy as well, which makes Llewyn mad. But then in that time frame, even now, but certainly that time frame, it could have been that he was aggressive, forced her, or even what we would call rape now, that wasn't thought of then. We don't really see her interact with Jim, though, almost at all. She sings with him. Is she mad at him all the time? And then she sleeps with Pappy, which you pointed out to me, because I said, wait a minute, it's supposed to be that maybe the baby was his? But then you pointed, no, she probably slept with him later on to get Llewyn the gig.
Yeah, so there's no way that Llewyn raped her. I just say that because she has so much love in her heart for him. The only reason she can hate him this much is because she does care about him so much. Otherwise, why would she ever let him in her apartment? She doesn't seem remotely afraid of him.
Women do that, though, don't they? When they've been put in a bad position, especially back then.
Do you think... I don't think there's...
I don't. I'm just speculating.
Oh, okay.
Because you asked me the question. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out myself.
So this is my theory. Pure fan fiction, speculation, because the Coens have not told us. But this is, in my imagination, what happened. Maybe 6 weeks ago, depending on the reliability of pregnancy tests, they had a moment where he said, leave Jim, marry me, and they sleep together. And then when she said, yes, let's run away together, he chickened out and he split.
Okay.
And of course, he can't be too proud to come back and ask for help because he's so desperate.
He keeps asking for help constantly in this movie.
Because he's burned every other bridge in New York. He has the Gorfines that, for some reason, keep forgiving him. And he has his sister.
Because he's talented, that's why.
Yeah, and then that's a really interesting relationship, too. They are so nice to him. They have so much to offer him. This should be, like, his ticket, right?
They forgive him when he was a jerk at dinner during the middle of the movie, but he comes back... And they both seem to forget, but they do forgive him.
He's such a jerk to them. She doesn't deserve that at all. But she's just like, it's my fault. Lady, it's not your fault at all.
I'm surprised you're saying that, though, because women, certainly back then and even now, would feel like it is their fault if they've ever made their guest uncomfortable. I must have done something wrong if he got upset. One thing about Llewyn I don't like in that scene at all is when he makes the point something like, I'm not a trained monkey, but you're a fucking singer, and they want you to sing for them. Oh my God, you poor artist. That kind of thing irritates me when people talk about that, a comic or something. I'm not going to tell jokes when I'm off my time. Okay, but you're known for this, and they're saying that they think you're good at this. So when you just meet somebody in public and they, oh my God, it's Llewyn Davis playing music for us right now. I get not wanting to do that. But with friends of yours at a dinner party when your guitar's right there, you can't warble a few songs. You should want to sing and play music for people all the time. Anyway, if that's your passion, you fucking asshole.
No, he is a fucking asshole. Llewyn's wrong. Everything he does to her, the resistance to just playing a song for them, getting mad at her for singing the part, all of that is completely inappropriate. Now, granted, when he shows up, he's definitely already agitated. There's a lot going on. But whatever. I don't think the movie's trying to make excuses for him. But then why does he have this animosity towards them? Why does he express cruelty towards her? She doesn't deserve it. And I think part of the theme of the movie is, will he sell out? Won't he? He absolutely won't. But then Jim and Jean will. And then they're going to have more success. And that Hey, Mr. Kennedy song is going to make them enough money to move to the suburbs and have a family and have this boring square life that he looks down on so much. And he just cannot get right with this very nice couple who are doing all these lovely things for him because they're the bourgeois. They live in this nice apartment. They clearly have a lot of money, and they're co-opting folk music and selling out, God forbid. But folk music itself is an art form of the poor. It came out of very put upon people. It was a song about their suffering. And then for all of these wealthy people to suddenly be catching on to it and treating it like it's their own, it makes him angry. He's obviously very poor in this movie, but he also didn't really grow up rich. We see where he came from. He seemed to have everything he needed growing up, but he didn't have money. Mm-hmm. The only reason he lives in New York is because he's a genuine New Yorker, born and bred. I don't remember where exactly he's from. Is it Staten Island or something? No, it can't be Staten Island.
Well, he's in Manhattan a lot, but they're not from Manhattan.
Yeah, but he's a New Yorker anyway. So he has this class resentment about either people trying to use folk music and corrupt folk music in order to make enough money to join the middle class, or people in the upper middle class trying to sing along with folk music and treat it like it's their own. No, it's not yours, it's mine. You have everything else. You don't get to have this too.
Which I get his side to some degree, but also people are going to sing along to fucking songs they like.
But like I said, he's wrong. It's one of the many ways that he is impossible to root for.
Yeah. Well, the movie opens at the Gaslight Cafe in February 1961. He's singing Hang Me, Oh Hang Me. The song we hear more than once in this movie is Fare Thee Well, with the two of them playing.
You hear Hang Me, Oh Hang Me twice as well. He sings it at the end.
Right, because
and
it
like
comes
an
back
almost
along.
mirror image of that.
Yeah, because this movie is a Mobius strip. It comes back
Yeah.
around. And one person to mention, he's briefly in the movie, portrayed, not the actual guy, is Bob Dylan, who at this point I believe is still playing folk music the way we think of folk music, but he's going to plug in, and that was a big controversy, and people were so mad at him, the real guy, for doing that. I think in the mid-'60s or something like that.
Because he did what?
He plugged in.
Oh,
Bob
because
Dylan.
he started playing electric guitar, you mean? Oh, okay.
How dare you? There were people that were legit outraged about the actual Bob Dylan doing that in reality.
But that's why he was the breakout folk artist, right?
Right.
Because he was actually on the vanguard. Llewyn is so talented. He's such a beautiful musician.
Way better singer than Bob Dylan ever was.
He sings Fare Thee Well, the last song that we see him play at the Gaslight. And then Bob Dylan comes up and he doesn't play Fare Thee Well, but he plays a song that has very similar lyrics. We're obviously being told to draw comparisons between the two of them, and he has his Bob Dylan idiosyncrasies about the way that he plays, and he has that really strange affectation, and it's the difference between somebody who does something well and somebody who is changing the genre.
Who captures people.
Who captures people because he's doing something different, because he's actually innovating. Because as talented as Llewyn is, he's not really innovating versus Bob Dylan, who then, like you say, is going to plug in. He's going to have massive influence on folk music and change it tremendously in his career, and also really make it mainstream in a way that it wasn't in 1960.
I also get not wanting to sell out whatever you're doing for a living. That's understandable. But when you don't have a home, and you can't afford to eat sometimes, and you're begging people that don't like you to just let you stay there for the night. One of the best scenes in this entire movie, actually, was when he's still in, I think, Illinois, when he's on the road trying to see Bud Grossman. So first of all, we'll deal with that scene, then we'll get to my favorite part of the latter part of that scene. But when he plays for Bud Grossman, beautiful song, F. Murray Abraham looks him dead in the eye and says, "I don't see money here."
We are set up to expect the thing we've seen
Right.
in a million movies before. The camera's
You've
doing
got
slow
it.
push, and the lighting is so beautiful. It's angelic. You can see him start a little shy, but by the end of the song, he's completely opened up, and he's just gives such a beautiful performance. And while F. Murray Abraham is not moving his face at all, we just assume, because we've seen this scene before, we know how this ends. Oh, he's going to get a record contract. Oh, everything's going to turn around. Everything's going to be great. But then the total subversion of expectations.
I don't see money here.
Yeah.
Rather than Orson Welles in the Muppet movie, drop the standard rich and famous contract.
Right, it's such a cliche. Even when the Muppet movie came out, that everybody was really familiar with this cliche, and they set us up, and then they just tear the rug out from under us.
Llewyn asks him about the record that his agent was supposed to have sent. Mel was supposed to send the record to him. Bud says, "I didn't get it." Maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't care to listen to it. Or maybe Mel fucked up and didn't send it to him in the first place.
Any of these things could totally be true.
And also, Bud might be wrong in listening to Llewyn. I think he is wrong. This guy certainly has so much talent. Maybe he's not really truly showing us his heart and soul the way that I guess Bob Dylan did. But okay, here's the part I love so much when he's, I think, still on the road. But wherever this was, he steps in a big puddle of water and he goes to a diner. I don't know if he even has $5 to his name. Probably not. And you can see his foot is still wet from that. It probably just happened. He takes his foot out of the shoe and his sock is soaking wet. I don't think this guy ever changes in the whole movie. He's like Cary Grant in North by Northwest. Most of the movies in that blue suit. In this movie, most of the time, Llewyn's wearing the same clothes. We never see him wash those clothes. He's like
Or
planes,
himself.
Right, so it's like planes, trains, and automobiles. I've been wearing the same underwear since Tuesday. So he's doing the same. But just the patheticness of that. My foot is wet and very cold, and I've got no other options. I don't have any other clothes. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Even if he was back in New York, it's not like he has a home to go to. But where are any of the things he has? His sister has some of the stuff, most of which she threw out because apparently he told her to, including his information and his papers and his license and everything to be a merchant marine. They don't say it specifically, but obviously the notion is, I'm never going to do this again, so throw that shit out for me, Joy. And she did. And then he's mad at her, and he doesn't really push back too much when she says, you told me to throw that out.
Yeah, because he's wrong. He did tell her to throw it out. We hear him tell her to throw it out. He says, put it on the curb. She has the box of his stuff, and she's like, go through it.
I
And
got
he's
that
like,
feeling
why
this
it's
was
all
years
junk.
ago. Okay.
The whole movie takes place sequentially. There's no
No, but I
there's
thought it was supposed to be
flashbacks.
he said that to her a long time ago.
We see him say, put it on the curb. I don't want any of this. I mean, he has nowhere to put it. He has nowhere to go.
Well, his license could go in his back pocket, though.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to bother going through it because he's just an irresponsible fuck-up.
He also doesn't want to be a merchant marine for real until he has no other options.
And even giving up and being a merchant marine and being a square and being a person, what does he say to her, who who just exists. That's what it is. Oh, Dad just existed. I'm just going to exist. He's going to go be a merchant marine and just exist like all of these other losers, which is a little bit how he looks at everybody else. He has to think that way. That's the only way he can justify the actual misery and squalor that he lives in. But I think all of his decisions, whether it's telling his sister to throw out everything in that box or going out to Chicago without a dime on a whim with a cat, all these crazy decisions that he makes are consistent with his character being profoundly self-destructive and loving the misery. There's a scene near the middle of the movie where he's in a coffee shop with Jean. She's bringing his stuff to him, and she's lecturing him about getting her the money for the abortion or whatever. She says, "You're like this because you want to be this way. This is what you live for. And you can look down on me and Jim, and you can look down on all the other squares in the world. But your suffering is your own making and your own squalor that you wallow in." So his high standards of music purity, it's a wall that he holds between himself and success. And it's an excuse to look down on people who do what's necessary to pay the bills and get ahead, people whose couches he sleeps on. And that attitude is also his excuse to really indulge in his depression. I think we all expect depression to look like somebody crying, looking wistfully out a window on an overcast day. No, this is what depression looks like. It looks like self-destructive behavior, and it looks like this uncalled for anger and these outbursts that don't make sense and these decisions that are so poor and illogical. He's grieving over his partner who jumped off the Washington Bridge, and he's struggling with that grief, but he's loving it. He's loving the wallowing. He's loving maybe just having somewhere to put all of these ugly feelings that he has all the time. And the universe keeps giving him ways to get out. He has a sister and a nephew who love him, even if he's difficult. He has that ex, I think her name is Diane, who has his child in Akron, he learns, when he goes to pay for Jean's abortion and discovers that
He's
the
a
last
credit.
one never happened. He has a credit. They give him a credit at the abortion clinic.
You're in the black.
And there's the beautiful scene when he's driving past Akron and the guy in the car with him is asleep and he sees this beautiful warm glow, you know, like a fireplace, the harvest of home coming from the city of Akron. Should he pull over the car? Should he go seek out his girlfriend? But he doesn't. He just keeps going. I don't want to take that out either.
Well, partly the problem there is, of course, if he does that, he is responsible to the guy driving that car, or presumably owns that car.
Okay, fine. It's a little symbolic, but he could drive to Akron and be like, "Hey, guy, I decided to get off here instead. You're on your own. Drive to New York.
That's true.
Have fun. Thanks for getting me this far." But he doesn't. He's tempted, but he keeps going. And most of all, the symbol we have not talked about yet.
The cat?
The cat. Say what you want about the cat. He has this other creature, this other wanderer, this other lost soul, abandoned, has no family, no one to speak of, and they are getting along great. They're going places. The cat clearly likes him. This could be a start. This could be a family, a relationship.
Well, this cat belongs to the Gorfines.
No, it doesn't, though, because it's the wrong cat.
Oh, that cat.
I think by the time he's on the road trip, he knows it's the wrong cat, but he just doesn't know what to do, so he takes the cat with him. Until he doesn't. And this is when I talk about how this character is hard to root for.
Does not save the cat.
Does not save the cat. Save the cat. Shorthand for make your character likable by having them save the cat. I wonder if they did that on purpose, made it a cat instead of a dog, because God knows this movie would have been a lot easier to make if it was a dog instead of a cat, because cats are impossible.
They talked about how it's hard to train this cat, and the Coens threw it in there because the idea being, there's not really a plot in this movie, and we need something, so let's have it be Ulysses, because that's the name of the cat we find out at the end of the film.
Ulysses, which is the Roman name for Odysseus. Odysseus, the main character in the Odyssey, the book that Oh Brother Where Art Thou is very loosely based
and
on.
Everett McGill's name, and that George Clooney's character's middle name is Ulysses.
That's right.
Or is it maybe his first? Ulysses Everett McGill, or maybe it's the other way around, but it's definitely part of his name.
And the character of Odysseus, or Ulysses, was a man who was at war and just got lost on his way home. Took him 10 years to get home to his kingdom of Ithaca. So you have a man here who's on a journey, who's lost, that can't seem to find his way home. Well, he can find his way home, but what is home to him? He's Ulysses. And they explicitly say at one point through a misunderstanding in a phone conversation, Llewyn is the cat. Although the cat is a confounding symbol. I think this is one of those things when we talk about how the Coens are giving us less and less to work with as far as interpreting what they mean. I think the symbol of the cat is pretty open to interpretation.
Especially when there's two cats.
Yes, exactly. It's not just Ulysses. He is taking care of Ulysses for a little while, and then Ulysses gets away. He sneaks out of Jean's apartment, and then we don't really see Ulysses again until he's back with the Gore finds. And then for a huge chunk of time, he's with this other random cat with no name. Don't even know the cat's gender. We just know it doesn't have testicles like Ulysses does. Yeah. So it could even be a female cat.
Does he run over that cat when he hits a cat in the middle of nowhere?
I mean, it looks like the
You could argue that that's some kind of metaphorical sequence or an imagination, or I don't think he fell asleep at the wheel, but...
The whole movie's so dreamlike that it is fair to say, did he imagine this? It's so surreal, especially the road trip. There's so much surreal stuff that takes place.
And to hit a cat at whatever highway speed you'd be going, even if you weren't going that fast because it was snowing so much and it was nighttime, you'd probably wipe it out. And yes, it's hurt and it's limping off. My favorite shot in the whole film is when the cat is limping off. I love the moment with the wet shoe, but the best shot, the look of it, you're talking about the feeling of it, which is great too, but I'm just talking about the physical look. Because Bruno Del Bono was not a Coen guy. Deakins was. Roger Deakins worked with them over and over again. He was nominated for so many Oscars with them. He finally won. I mentioned Dune already. He won for Denis Villeneuve's previous movie before Dune, Blade Runner 2049. Deakins has finally won his Oscars after never winning with the Coens. But when that cat limps off, it makes you wonder if that's real at all. And Llewyn doesn't chase after it because it may not be that cat anyway. And even if it is, he left the cat behind with John Goodman in the car, a guy who had just OD'd. I don't think Roland died by the side of the road because somebody's going to come along. The cop came along when they were just parked, and Johnny Five, Garrett Hedlund's character, who's very much like Peter Stormare is in Fargo. You gonna say anything? I did. Yeah. That's the only thing we've said all the time. So he's the Peter Stormare character, basically doesn't speak almost at all. He does more as the movie goes on, but the cop pulls them over and takes him in for being sleepy.
Yeah, for
because he
sleeping
even talks about how they're sleeping by the side of the road, which is far better than driving when you're tired at night. But anyway, he goes off. He's got the keys with them. And Llewyn's stuck in the car with the cat and with this guy who just OD'd and leaves them both behind. We never find out what happened to them. So it may not even be that same cat anyway. But even if it was, what's he going to do with this cat? Except he'd been loyal to the cat before. He took the cat on the road with him. So, I don't know. That sequence is so metaphorical, like you say. The whole point of going to Chicago on a whim to see a guy who doesn't know he's coming, the fact he gets rejected, he never really reacts to it. He never says to anybody, Bud Grossman's a fucking asshole. If he was thinking that, there's a part of me that would say, yeah, but you showed up unannounced. Chicago's a big city. Not New York, but still a pretty big city. If you didn't make it there, that's not that shocking. If it was Kansas City, that's actually a pretty big music city. That's a bad example. But if you went to Omaha and they have a music scene, but they're looking for people, then maybe you get to play there. But Chicago's a big place too, and it's your fault for going out there without a real plan. But then back then in the 60s, I guess, when you had almost no money, you could get by hitching rides and hoping you get along because it wouldn't cost that much to get out there if you're willing to do that, especially if you don't need to change your clothes. Just basically eating and drinking, well, water and maybe a little bit of coffee doesn't cost that much either.
We don't really see him eating and drinking very much. And Hang Me, Oh Hang Me, a song that could be considered Llewyn's theme. Everything he says in that song is very similar to the things that he goes through. One of the lines is, I got so goddamn hungry, I could hide behind a straw, poor boy. He must be hungry. Do we ever see him eat?
Not much, anyway.
He doesn't look like he's underfed. He looks like he's fine. He never complains about being hungry. He never seems to eye food.
Cut to 2 months from now, though.
Yeah, good point. Is he just somebody who's really accustomed to living with hunger, and that's just part of this suffering that he enjoys, along with his freezing cold, wet feet and the loneliness and the chaos of his life?
The homelessness might be really new to him, too. It might only be a month or two now.
I don't know, he seems real practiced at it. When he does this session with Adam Driver's character, where do you live? You got a couch? You just met this person. You guys have no rapport at all. You're a stranger to him, and you know that he's too nice to say no, or you don't care. You're like, it's still worth it to just check, and he sleeps on his couch.
Driver is a character who has rarely smiled at anything he's done, and rarely seemed like a truly nice guy. He seems like a nice guy in reality, when he does the interview circuit and that kind of thing, but when he does his roles, he comes across like a dick over and over and over again. This is so against character for him, and it's fun to see it. He just does the background stuff when they sing that song, that kind of thing. And he's a pretty smiley, nice dude in this. And there's a lot of connections, too, because, of course, the two of them were in Star Wars together as antagonist and protagonist. Driver's the nice guy here, but he's the villain in Star Wars, and Oscar Isaac is the hero in Star Wars, and he's our main character, but not really the hero. That's why I did the cough hero thing during the sponsor earlier. And Adam Driver worked with Alex Karpovsky, who's got that small scene at one point, the intellectual guy with the, I think, Asian wife?
Yeah.
On Girls.
At the time this movie came out, I don't know if I knew Adam Driver from anything but Girls. I think that was his calling card.
And he's a dick in that, too.
Oh, he's a huge dick in that show. Who has like a redemption arc, as does Alex Karpovsky.
And Timberlake, who had made a name for himself in music, of course, was also really good in The Social Network. But he's barely in this. This huge name who they cast in this has maybe 3 scenes.
But if you're an actor, if you care about the craft at all, this is one of the directors or directing teams that you will agree to do a small part with.
Fine, I'm just surprised at how little he's actually in it, because I haven't seen it in a while and thought he was in it more.
I want to circle back to the cat for a minute, because there was an interesting theory that I read online. I don't know if I agree with it, but I think it at least is a fascinating theory about the meaning of the cat, and that is that the cat is this spiritual medium that's channeling his dead partner, Mike, and that's why they're attached. That's why he keeps chasing him. Every time he runs away, he could just let it go, but up until the moment where push really comes to shove and he has to choose between the cat and himself, and he chooses himself, which could be a symbol of him finally letting go of this grief that he has with Mike, because what is the next thing he does? He abandons the cat, and he goes and he auditions for somebody who doesn't know him as a duo. Everybody in New York knows him as a duo. He is the solo act that's left over from this great tragedy. But Bud Grossman has no idea who Mike is. He doesn't know that.
But Bud Grossman has a great line, though, where he says, you should get back together with your partner.
What does he say? That's good advice.
Llewyn says that, right.
It's terrible.
And the subtext there is kill yourself. And I don't think Bud knows the guy's dead, but that's the subtext of the movie.
No, he doesn't. It's so hard to find a grain of optimism in the film, but here is the optimism in the film, and here is why Llewyn is a hero, even if it's very thin. He doesn't give up. He doesn't kill himself. There's no part of him that actually wants to end things. He will suffer, and he will struggle, and he will wallow in that, but he is never going to actually pull the trigger and kill himself.
Even when he gets his ass kicked by the guy at the end.
He always picks himself up. That's the thing. He gets his ass kicked, and he's still mouthing off to the guy. And he watches him leave in the taxi, and he picks himself back up. This is what makes
Fairly
Llewyn...
well.
Yeah, this is what makes Llewyn a hero. He will always pick himself back up after he gets himself into one terrible scrape after another.
And this is a Mobius strip kind of movie, and it comes back around. We saw at the very beginning with this guy confronted him in the alley. Mr. Hobby, I guess is his name. She's Betty Hobby, the one that Llewyn had heckled. We don't see the heckling until towards the end, but we see what happens to him at the very beginning, and then we see it happen to him again at the very end. It's an opaque type of ending. No Country was an opaque kind of ending. Serious Man was an opaque kind of ending. Barton Fink had a similar kind of opaque ending as well. But Jean has a line early on where she says, all the same shit is going to keep happening to you. That plays in the Mobius strip thing as well. And that's true because it does keep happening to him, and he keeps bringing it on himself. And I think you're right. I think he, in some ways, wants this to keep happening to him.
Oh, totally. But he does learn one small lesson. Even though we meet this person and we get to know him and he just keeps screwing up and screwing up. And he heckles this poor woman on stage, who's the only authentic folk singer. He has this whole problem with phoniness, and he can judge all the young men in their fisherman sweaters, or the army guy, the soldier, who's singing his song, and Jean and Jim, and he thinks they're all a bunch of phonies, and he looks down on them, but he's quiet for their performance. This woman comes up, and she's the real deal. She's just a housewife who has a beautiful voice, who plays her instrument, who loves music, and is there for all the right reasons, and that's the person that he heckles. That's the person who's challenging his own authenticity, because she is the real deal. And how much does she look like Mrs. Gorfine? She is dressed, she has the exact same glasses. You're really meant to draw a comparison.
Maybe his mom
there.
Looks like that.
Ooh, maybe.
Or looked like that.
Yeah.
Because their father's in a home and doesn't seem to be able to speak and does shit himself while Llewyn has played that song for him.
You notice how every time Llewyn performs a song, something terrible happens immediately afterwards?
That plays into the old brother thing then, too, because another music film like that, that's, of course, a lot more fun than this is. This is a comedy, though, a lot of the time, especially when Carey Mulligan gets to just be mad at him. But in Oh Brother, whenever Clooney falls asleep, something bad happens.
That's right. Okay, so there is one way that he does learn his lesson. At the very end, he's sleeping on the Gorfine's couch, and he gets up, and he's leaving, and the cat tries to get out, and he's like, ha, not so fast. He kind of uses his feet to deke around so that the cat doesn't get out, and he escapes the apartment, closes the door behind him. Fine, the cat's still in the apartment. He learned one lesson. So I think the implication here is that this man can learn. He can get better. And that is the little kernel of hope that you take with you so that you can believe he is ultimately going to be okay. Speaking of whether or not Llewyn's going to be okay, we spend a good chunk of time with John Goodman's character
Roland.
in the car, and he is just the most acerbic, cruel. Every chance he gets to say the right thing, he says the exact opposite, meanest shit, and he's a junkie, and he's just full of shit, and he physically seems miserable. Every step he takes looks painful. But he still is arrogant enough to just shit on Llewyn every chance he gets, and he's a jazz musician. Another type of musician that no matter how talented you are, you could be the very best jazz musician there is, you might need a day job. Yeah. Is that Llewyn's future?
I think it's part of the reason why those scenes are in there, because it feels like in some ways they're just bringing back their old friend John Goodman to be in this movie. But yeah, I think there's supposed to be more text there. I think if you watch this movie a lot of times, maybe that's why this movie is so highly ranked by BBC Culture, the subtext. Because otherwise it seems like, okay, they got their old friend back in the movie. They haven't worked with Goodman in 13 years. But maybe that's supposed to be a huge part of it, which is not only is he the potential future for Llewyn, if Llewyn could afford to have a valet and drugs, which Llewyn can't currently, but maybe he will have just enough money to do that. And who can say that Roland, John Goodman's character, has a nice place to live? Maybe he doesn't have much of a place to live either, but he can afford to travel, be paid on the road, and then have the drugs and the valet. But the other part of it is the two of them argue in the car a lot. It's almost like Green Book, 5 years before Green Book. The most combative that Llewyn is probably with John Goodman. And maybe that's what it is I could be you, and there's a part of me that wants to, because you must be succeeding if you can have even the valet and the job you're going to. But also, fuck you, and I don't want to be that.
But whether it's Gene, whether it's Roland, whether it's the cowboy beating the shit out of him in the alley, this guy just takes his licks. He doesn't really fight back. The only time we see him being really mean to somebody is Mrs. Gorfine when she sings along, and the woman performing at the gaslight. Who looks like Mrs. Gorfine.
We already talked about Oscar Isaac's credits, Star Wars, Dune, etc. Not a fan of cats, I was reading, even though he spent so much time with this cat. And this
Maybe he's not a fan of cats because he had to spend so much time with this cat, and we heard how difficult it was on set.
That could be, yeah. This is the first time we've ever covered him, though I guess we've covered this movie twice, but this movie is the first time we've ever covered him. Same with Carey Mulligan. She was in Drive with Oscar Isaac, because he is her husband in that. And we're going to see her again fairly soon, because we're going to do Revenge Month in April. I won't say what movie it's going to be, but take a guess. John Goodman, we've covered him in Raising Arizona, Big Lebowski, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, Argo, and Chris and I recently did The Babe, where he plays Babe Ruth. So Goodman has been talked about on this channel, mostly with the Coens, a lot over the years. Timberlake, I mentioned The Social Network. We covered that many years ago. Very funny and bad teacher, especially in one scene. I hate racism so much. If I could go back in time and stop racism, I would. I misquoted that a little bit, but that's the spirit of it. God, that's so funny. Garrett Hedlund, who does play Johnny Five, driving the car, doesn't speak that much. He was in Mudbound with Carey Mulligan, so another connection here. I like him in Friday Night Lights, where he plays the running back who is abused by his father, and he's also in Troy and Tron. Adam Driver, 2 nominations. Don't forget about that. He's got more Oscar nominations than I think anybody else in this cast does. Maybe not Mulligan. She might have more than him, but he was nominated for Black Klansman and for Marriage Story. F. Murray Abraham, we've covered him 3 times before. Bet you don't remember any of them. Maybe one, where he won an Oscar.
Shoot, don't quiz me.
Amadeus.
Oh, of course.
But also he's got a small role in All the President's Men, and he was in the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Okay, 2 of those pretty small parts. So.
Yes, that's true. The Coens, we've covered Raising Arizona, Fargo, which made the AFI's Top 100 list, The Big Lebowski, which wasn't even nominated for the comedies list, believe it or not, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, The Man Who Wasn't There, and No Country for Old Men. So that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is 7 times we've covered the Coen brothers.
It won't be the last time either, I'm sure.
No, there'll be more. We'll probably do A Serious Man next year. And they produced the movie along with Scott Rudin. He's the prick who won an Oscar with them for No Country for Old Men when it won Best Picture. The movie's 185-1. We watched the Blu-ray that we own. The cinematographer, I mentioned this, Bruno Del Bono, has been nominated 6 times, including on this, of course. He also did Amelie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and The Tragedy of Macbeth. The cutters, the editors, the Coen brothers themselves as Roderick Jaynes. They didn't work with anybody else this time. A lot of times in the past they worked with Trisha Cook, but this time it's just them. And the composer, there's not really an actual composer credit this time. No Carter Burwell involved in this, but T-Bone Burnett. Oscar Isaac has a lot of writing credits on this. I think you could have nominated the score for this, though, because I guess some of these songs are probably old standards, but they aren't all, I don't think.
I think they were all written for the movie. He says the thing, oh, it's a folk song. It was never new. It'll never get old. But Hang Me, Oh Hang Me was written for the film along with, I think, everything else.
Should have been
I think
nominated.
it was all
then.
original. I 100% agree.
So we talked about the look already. We love the music. Those two things are an A+, but what about the cutting?
Technically, this film is so immaculate. When I talk about the appeal of this movie, it's that it's just a beautiful piece of art on every single level. Whether it's the music or the cinematography, the editing, the costume design, the acting, everything is really wonderful. The film is very dark and it's very desaturated. A trend that is very popular right now that I have paid quite a bit of criticism to, and I feel like there's a lot of copycats that are trying to mimic this look and just not really pulling off the true artistry of this film. There's no missteps in Inside Llewyn Davis. When it's so dark, you can barely see the cat. It's the perfect amount of darkness.
You can see it, though.
Yeah. The lighting in those scenes, those night scenes on the highway, oh, it's like a painting. It is so gorgeous, and you can see everything you need to see. The way the shadows are so dark, but you're painting a picture with the light. It's not just dark for the sake of darkness. If every desaturated dark movie that's being made this century looked like this, I would not have any complaints about it. But they're not.
So what happens next? Well, just because Bob Dylan plugged in doesn't mean Llewyn ever will. So he scuffles along, scrapes by with a few bucks here and there, and probably ends up dead in a flophouse. And he even manages to piss off all the people in the flophouse. And then everybody in the afterlife. Mike maybe doesn't welcome him with open arms when he gets to the afterlife.
He has the exact same story, but next time he takes a road trip to Nashville, flames out there, comes back to New York, and gets beat up in the alley again.
And if he ever does actually succeed, he's probably going to blow the money and wreck it all and be, maybe not homeless anymore, but he may be a Charlie Parker story, although Charlie Parker actually did make it in some kind of way that Llewyn hasn't. But then the record he has when he shows it to Bud Grossman is Inside Llewyn Davis. That's what it's called.
Now, I can't remember the name of the folk singer, but there's a folk singer that Llewyn Davis is based on, and they styled his album cover to look exactly like this folk singer's album cover. That singer did eventually find a level of success and was considered a mentor of people like Bob Dylan. So maybe that's the insinuation that this is him in hard times while he's grieving the loss of his friend and his creative partner. But maybe he finds a new creative partner in this new breed of folk music that is both authentic but also on the vanguard of where it's going in the future. I just keep trying really hard to have hope.
Well, you just gave me an idea, though, too. Maybe one of the reasons why this movie is so well respected by things like BBC Culture, because it wasn't that respected in its time. We loved it when we saw it. We saw it the same day we saw Her.
But a lot of people really don't like it. People who are Coen fans don't like this movie.
But I think filmmakers probably love it, too, because of the notion being that you plug away, and like you said, you don't give up, and maybe you'll get somewhere. We're not seeing the getting somewhere part. If this movie was 3 hours long, then maybe Llewyn does succeed in some kind of way. But then how happy would he be in a mansion?
Not one bit happier than he is now.
But no matter where you are in your showbiz career, you want to believe that you can make it on some level. Making a record that you can give to somebody is actually, especially before our times now, where you and I can make a record right now if we really wanted to. What we're doing right now is a creative endeavor that we couldn't have done 20 years ago.
Yeah, we can't quit our jobs to just podcast full time, but we still do it for a sense of fulfillment and for like a body of work that we've created too, that we're proud of.
Which I don't know that Llewyn really gets out of it.
He does love playing music. Every time he's actually playing and he's in the zone, it's the only time you see him happy.
Okay, last thoughts then on your last movie of the month of Bev, 8th annual, Inside Llewyn Davis.
Well, the best films to me are the films that make you work to discover their meaning, and I've gotten something new from this film every time I've watched it. It's fair if Llewyn's world is just too bleak and frustrating for some people, but like Llewyn, I can tolerate the suffering in exchange for the beauty and the music.
Yeah, it's a lyrical movie, naturally. And it's often very funny. Mulligan's fantastic. Also very white. You know, so they made her...
Alabaster.
Yeah, she truly is. Isaac is obviously a movie star. You say household name. I think that's maybe debatable for the casual fan, but he probably should be. He's just a great actor who picks good roles. Star Wars, in a lot of ways, is slumming for him because he's better than that. Although, it didn't hurt his brand name, though, either.
But he's a star in Star Wars and Dune and Marvel, so he's a household name, I think.
Okay. And the Coens made their last great film of this one, although in fairness... Joel has only directed 3 since, and Ethan has only been involved in 2. They did Hail Caesar, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and then it was just Joel doing The Tragedy of Macbeth, which was very good. That's the best of those 3, I would say. Although we haven't seen Buster Scruggs twice.
I think once I see Buster Scruggs a second time, I'm going to get a lot more out of it. Hail Caesar, not so sure.
So that wraps up the 8th annual Month of Bev. We saw 5 movies, plus I covered 3 others on my own. Your 5 choices were A Star is Born, Out of Sight, Before Midnight, 28 Days Later, and this, which is your favorite?
Ah, that's not fair. Lightning round answer, Before Midnight.
Okay. For me, the one I would watch the most out of all those would be Out of Sight, I think. And the 3 I chose, still the best one. Sherlock Jr., Defiant Ones, and She Done Him Wrong. I think Out of Sight's the best of the 8 podcasts that went up this month. Might be a record for me. I think 2 with Chris makes 10 in total I was involved in January.
You're a busy man.
I think Out of Sight's the best one. Okay, we're on YouTube. Type at HYES Ellis into your browser to find our growing archive of podcasts that usually have us on camera for about 10 minutes. The ones by myself have just been the podcast with our graphic. But you and I, so far as we record this, we've posted 3 videos with us on camera for about 10 minutes before the podcast plays in its entirety with the graphic. And we'll likely do that for this episode as well. But we don't want to promise that just yet because life could get in the way. In 7 days, we'll begin what seems to be turning into an annual February thing, Crazy Stupid Love Month. We called it the Month of Strange Love last year. These films feature either unusual and often impossible romances. To kick things off on February 6th, we'll do what we suggested we would do during one of our YouTube videos and discuss a motion picture that Sight and Sound's 2022 poll had in their top 10, Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. The coming attraction's opinion question for In the Mood for Love, which was released in America in 2001. So even though it wasn't, it would have been nominated for the Oscar for foreign language film that year, not in 2000, which is when Hong Kong, France, and so on first saw it. Some of the 2001 nominees for the best foreign language film are great, including Amelie, which we've covered, and the winner of the award, No Man's Land. Let's throw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon into this mix because it won the foreign language film Oscar for Taiwan in 2000, and it shares plenty of themes with In the Mood for Love, including people from that area of the world. Which is your favorite of all of those? Amelie, No Man's Land, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or In the Mood for Love?
Well, that's going to be easy for me.
I know. Probably me too.
And for our answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about In the Mood for Love. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen. If you already followed us as Top 100 Project, nothing will change, including access to our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at BevEllisEllis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. Or you can reach us by email, haveyouveurseenpodcast@gmail.com. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
Fare thee well, as she says, cut. Fare thee well, fare thee well.
And cut.
That was probably better than Dylan, wasn't it?
As in you were singing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, kind of.
But not Oscar Isaac. Fare thee well.